CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success. All right, we're here with George Williams, Reliability X. One of the other things associated with Reliability X that we all want to try to avoid, but you need to first be aware. Captain Unreliability. He is there to disrupt, but he pretends to make a difference. Now, we're doing something special. We're going to try some new things on CMMS Radio. George is an absolute expert on this subject. You all know I love CMMS, maintenance management, all that shit. So what we're really going to do is we're going to open up this thing we're going to call like the Wheel of Hogwash. And we're going to randomize topics that are critically important when it comes to figuring out whether you need a CMMS, what you should be doing with a CMMS, some of the things that go wrong with the CMMS, some of the people that get in the way of your CMMS success. This is not to sell software. This is to talk about people and process and how you can get one of these tools, why you should get one of these tools. And we're going to hear it from someone that's been there, done that, and you can multiply that exponentially. George Williams, let's crack open the Wheel of Hogwash and jump into a topic.
All right, Greg, let's take a look at what we got. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so we've got a lot of options here. We've got bad habits, utilization, what's useful inside of CMMS. Why do you need a CMMS? The implementation process, basics first. Overlooked features, that's an interesting one. What IT doesn't tell you.
There's a lot.
Hates CMMS. The do's and don'ts of dashboards and data standardization. So we are going to let the wheel
pick our fate.
Decide.
Woo, it's spinning, baby. Here we go.
My leadership hates the CMMS. Oh, this is such a good one.
All right. Amazing topic. Can go in a lot of different directions, many of which some might think are bad, but this is a good thing because we want to have an awareness. Every time we talk, at some point, we encounter this topic of leadership. It's how to get teams moving well. It's what leadership doesn't do. They stay behind their desk. Then we talk about leadership gets out there. They spend time with their people. And we're like, yeah, that's real leadership. All this stuff. So as it pertains to CMMS, can you think of anything off the top of your head that would cause leadership to hate the CMMS?
I can think of 8 million things. That's why we have a whole topic for it. I think first and foremost, they don't like the CMMS because no one is showing them any value from the CMMS. So if you're an organization that has one today, the question is, I'm spending money on it every year. What am I getting for that money? What is the value that leadership is seeing? They don't necessarily understand the value. And so either we're not doing an adequate enough job of communicating that value, or maybe we're not even using it and the value is not there. So leadership's not wrong. I think there's a couple of factors that go into that.
Now, as you're saying that, I'm thinking of one particular aspect of leadership, and that is the CFO. I mean this in the nicest possible way. When they see a number, especially a big number, and they cannot tie it to how that helps the company thrive. Maybe they don't see it. Let's understand a lot of CFOs aren't going to get out from behind their desk, and sometimes they can't. However, if they really knew, they might not consider redlining those things. But if your people are not using it and showing how it helps the organization, how it helps those people earn their bonuses and these people stay safer and generate more throughput, leadership, especially the CFO, is naturally going to, quote unquote, hate the CMMS because it's a weighted cost that's holding them back.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think in addition to that, they likely have an ERP that probably has some CMMS bolt on that may or may not be effective or utilized. and maybe they don't want you to choose something else, and the business might be using a tool that's not part of the ERP. And so both IT and the CFO are saying, I don't understand this. Why aren't you just using the tool we have? And
Yeah.
somebody needs to make the compelling argument, because they're not wrong in asking the question. There's nothing wrong in asking the question. They're not seeing the value. So the organization, the business side of the organization, has to be able to defend the necessity of the CMMS.
Okay. Let's do an exercise. This is so I'm at the company. I want to get a CMMS. We don't have one.
Okay.
I know that I need one because I have limited visibility to the data, the things. I need to know where they are, what they are, when we got them, what we paid for it, what needs to be done to it, what has or hasn't been done to it. I want a CMMS so that I really have a nice, clean place to see that and empower my team to track it, load in data, all this stuff. I go to the CFO. I'm like, I need visibility to this because I'm not seeing it and I can't make adjustments that would help us as an organization. CFO says to me, Greg, we already have Microsoft, just use Excel. And somehow he gets me out of his office and just leaves me with that. Figure it out. How do we approach that same individual to make a compelling case for getting the CMMS? What did I not tell that individual that would have made a difference in him taking a moment to hear me?
Oh, it's not what you didn't tell them that's important, Greg. It's what do they want to hear that's important.
Like what?
You have to know your audience. So you're asking me to tell you how to justify a CMMS when I don't know who I'm justifying it to. For example, depending on the industry, you have different risks to the business. Some risks are financial. Some risks are audit based on government regulations. Some businesses are more safety and food safety related, or individual personal safety, or equipment safety, or uptime related, or throughput related. And then on top of what's important to the business, you have the individual who you sat next to in order to ask for the CMMS. What motivates that individual? How is a CMMS going to make them look good? It's not always. People fall short of getting what they're looking for because they try to influence somebody with what they think is important.
Rather than understanding.
It's about what the other person thinks is important.
Okay, got it.
If I go in there and I tell them all the amazing things I'm going to do inside a CMMS so that I can get mean time between failure data, and I'll be able to manage the vibration program, and I'm going to do all this stuff that no one else cares about but me. How am I convincing somebody that I should have that? That's not how you influence others. You influence others by listening, by understanding what motivates them and how you can help make them successful. And so if you're in the office of the CFO, you're looking at, I can get clarity into my spend. I know which assets are absorbing the money. I know, like, there's a ways to have that conversation. It still means I need PMs. I need to link my spare parts to my equipment. I need to be able to see all that, but not being so technical in the application, but more in the business value. Whereas if I'm talking to someone that's a people person and not a bean counter, then maybe I want to talk about how I'm going to be able to teach people how to do the PMs, because the steps are going to be there. And we know we're having issues with hiring skills trades today, but I'll be able to document the current people and what they do and pass that knowledge on. You have to understand your audience long before you develop what your pitch is going to be.
So,
and I think we oftentimes jump to what our perception of value as opposed to what leadership's perception of value is. And that can be individualized by the person sitting in the seat.
And I keep thinking of this idea that we people that don't know, they might not even know, they don't know that they don't know. They think they're going in one shot deal to make a pitch and try to walk out of there with a yes. And that's extremely rare. But
Yeah.
they don't know that because they don't spend as much time doing those types of things within the organization until they maybe level up or whatever, and then they start to realize they have to develop those skills. Is there a so there's no magic silver bullet other than seek to understand, to then find an opportunity or a problem that matters, that is connected to the problem that you've already identified that matters to you. Now we've got something where we can present a value proposition to the individual and the organization, and thereby us, our team, and what we're trying to do on the plant floor.
Right. So if if you have that conversation and a person is pushing back, you also have to be able to maneuver that. You have to be able to articulate. So let's say you're talking to the CFO and they're saying, well, if you just ask people, they'll know what equipment is the bad equipment because you're going to visit it all the time. And your response to that would be, oh, well, we should do the same thing on the finance side, not have actual invoices to customers, but just go ask salespeople how much we've sold to people, right? That's a ridiculous argument where you're trying to just shut a door on me, and that's not really going to work. So you've also got to prepare yourself, right? So there's two things that you should always that should always be in place before you make a pitch to leadership. One is you should know your audience. The second one is you should be the most prepared person in the room. Always think about what will they ask, how will they push back, and you should know that person enough to know exactly how they push back because they probably have done this in the past, whether with yourself or others in the company. And so you should have a general idea of what questions they're going to ask and what how difficult they're going to be to convince. And so you've got to be prepared for that. And you've got to have your canned answers for those things ready. I always tell people, you put slide decks together to do presentations, but you never give away the backup slides when you send it out for pre-read. You hold all those. And your backup slide should be answering any question that you think someone's going to ask you. And then this way you can go, oh, I already covered that. It's right here in the backup slides. Here's my information, right?
Yeah.
But I think as we go back to the topic at hand, which is really, why does leadership hate the CMMS system? Again, we're back to value. So let's say we've pitched that value and we get the go ahead. At some point, we still have to demonstrate the value, right? I mean, if we get the accepted, okay, let's get a CMMS system in place, or we already have one, people may struggle to keep the CMMS. Every year they're saying, well, let's get rid of this one because we're not seeing the value, or they're saying this one's too expensive, so we want to go with something cheaper. Or even when you go down the path of getting one, they just want to go with whatever's the cheapest thing because they don't think they add value. Right. I think all those things are a lack of understanding of what the CMMS can do for the organization. And the onus is on us as the business, again, to convince them of what that system can do. And then we have to prove it. So if you find yourself in a position now where you have a CMMS and you're not getting the value from it, it's not IT's fault and it's not the CFO's fault. So we've got to also look in the mirror here.
I like that, and it reminds me of the other alternative where, or the other thing that can come up. We've got a CMMS, we use it, it is driving value, but they're not seeing it. So it comes down to education and somehow educating them about the value, because they might not be looking at it all the time. It might be hidden behind some other metrics that are more important to them. Can you talk a little bit about that and how we maybe, if I have to go make this presentation, whether I've met that CFO or not, and there's a couple other people in the room, things I should consider that would be breadcrumbs for them to have a discovery moment?
Well, I think you have to document every improvement you make. So if you're using the CMMS system and the CMMS is giving you information and you go make something better, that can't happen in a vacuum. That needs to be an email out that says, hey, we found this scenario. And I don't mean we got to 4-hour downtime event and we fixed it by changing out a gearbox. That's not a win. You had a 4-hour downtime event. But if you alter your PM strategy and suddenly your gearbox failure is cut in half, I saw that crappy cup you just picked up, by the way.
Be nice. Be nice. Enjoy your championship.
If your failure's cut in half, you need to promote that. And so people need to see that value. If you're not self-promoting, then of course they're going to ask questions and not understand the value. And people are going to say, well, that's not really my job. My job is to, manage maintenance. And your job in managing maintenance is to be seen as one of the pivotal leaders in the plant. And it's not just about handing out work orders or holding people accountable to getting work done. Or answering questions when there's a failure. It's also about how can I hit the objectives of the organization, whether it's a manufacturing plant or a public utility. There are organizational objectives that as a maintenance organization, you're trying to help achieve. And so how are you using the CMMS system to achieve those goals? Right. So for example, safety's got goals, and you might sit in a room and you're not getting support from the safety organization. That's not the safety person's fault. That's your fault, because you're not giving them an understanding of how you support their goals. We talked earlier about, knowing the audience. And in this case, if I execute planned work, I am less likely to be injured than if I am reactive. And so if I can manage things in a CMMS and I can structure things and I can execute in a more controlled environment, I am less likely to be injured. So if safety is a critical thing to the CFO or to whoever you're talking to regarding, hey, we need a CMMS system, that should be one of your arguments as well. Well, if I'm in a controlled environment and I can control the work, then I can protect my people better. And so understanding the audience, again, is always the critical piece there.
You alluded to something earlier that in my mind, I just kept having this flashing word: compliance, 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 which is also part of what matters to the organization. But a lot of times they don't know that in a constant state. They know that when it goes off the rails. And I'm thinking that a CMMS plays actually a prominent role in how you can be ready for, document, and help people maintain compliance rather than, the CMMS being a babysitter. And when you go to leadership, they would have an interest in that too. If you can show that lack of compliance, because you don't have anything that keeps the accountability for compliance, costs the company money and then costs even more to fix it. Is that another good case? Who in leadership really, if we're talking about, I'm generalizing here, right? Like, let's say it's a true enterprise, whatever that really means to anybody, right? It's fairly substantial company, multiple locations, high production of lots of products, big revenue, lots of employees. Is there kind of a standard list of who you need as leadership champions for your CMMS project, whether it is to keep one or to get one or replace one? Is there a standard list of, these are the people you definitely got to get in front of in your experience?
Yeah. I mean, you certainly have I guess we'll just use this fictitious organization, but a VP of quality, the VP of ops, finance, obviously, and IT. They're the critical aspects if you're in an organization that has compliance risk. Without the compliance risk, maybe you don't necessarily need the VP of quality, but you still need finance and IT for sure. And I would never leave out ops. You are of service to the operation. So the VP of ops should be on board.
Yeah. In fact, as part of this, I hope it's appropriate for the topic per the Wheel of Hogwash, but when it comes to team alignment ahead of that kind of presentation, you should also, when you're trying to gain leadership support, you should already have built support in non-leadership roles. And I think of operations and maintenance, they're actually supposed to be a tandem. And oftentimes they're not. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole here, but when there's some alignment there and they've got value, everybody can contribute to what you can bring for trying to acquire that leadership support as well. Is that a good way to look at it as well?
1,000%. And I think you should meet with those folks, the VP, even at the leadership level, individually before you meet as a group to give the pitch, so that you can put a personal twist on it. This is why it's important to compliance. This is why it's important to operations. This is why it's important to finance. And here's how I'm going to be of service when you approve this system, so that when you get them all in a room, you already know that they're acclimated and expecting a delivery that you've already given them, right? You want to eliminate the potential for a pack mentality,
Is
where
that kind of like
somebody decides to push back and then everybody jumps on board with it. And you can limit that potential by having a one-on-one conversation ahead of your pitch.
well, that goes back to influence as well, because if you have influence in multiple places, you thus have more influence. And in the end, it's about having enough influence to get the decision that you want to make the improvement for the organization. And then when you come out the back end of that, so to speak, you show the actual ROI, you show the not so much heroic moments that, Captain Reliability is looking for, but more about the milestones that are achieved, the improvements that are achieved, the major issues that are averted, that are postponed and potentially eliminated. I mean, if we get down to the defect level, but we don't want to spin out on reliability quite yet.
Yeah.
Is there a scenario you can think of in your long journey in the space where you had an easy time, maybe the bad choice of words there, but an easier time of building that leadership support to move forward? What I'm looking for is, are there any stories where there was kind of a magical aha moment that you can share, that where leadership was like, oh yeah, and they were like ready to go?
I've got lots of those, some of which are not necessarily good stories. So, wow. I wish that we lived in a world where truth alone mattered. But that's not always the case, right? I wish that we lived in a world where you just went in there and said, look, I have to manage my business. I need a CMMS. And that was it. You should not have to play the game. But to be ignorant to the game is to be accepting of impending failure.
Mm.
And so learning how to play the game is critical if you would like to be successful, especially when you get to larger organizations. Wow, stories. Oh, man. I remember being told I had to justify an additional $2 million spend on development of functionality in a company that had spent, we'll just make up some numbers here, but they're not terribly far off, $15 million on a previous implementation of the same system. It was no longer supported. We had to upgrade. We were asking for $2 million above the quote, which was still below the 15 previously spent. And so I got called into a meeting and they all sat around the room and they demanded to know what the ROI was on the additional $2 million. And my response to them was, you're asking the wrong question. The question is not, what will the ROI be on the additional $2 million? The question is, should you waste all of the other money by not getting what you should have put in when you spent the 15 and wasted it? Or should you just spend the other two and get the data you wanted?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You spent 15, and the whole time that we were in the previous system, you complained that you didn't quite have the data you needed. I'm telling you, we need to spend 2 million more so that we can enforce that data structure, that things can be drop downs instead of typing in the spaces. Like, we want to make it airtight so you get the data you're looking for. You're asking me to justify the additional spend. I'm telling you to don't waste what you did last time. They're not the same thing. You can not spend the two and flush everything else down the toilet, or you can spend the two and get the money. So it's really not about all the other money. It's only about the two.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting one. I had another company that wanted to shift from a legacy calibration system into SAP PM, and this was in a regulated industry where calibration needed to be regulated. And so they wanted to shift everything from a CMMS, a calibration system, CMMS, not necessarily what you and I would say is a CMMS, but they tout themselves as being one.
Sure.
They wanted to get out of that system and put everything into SAP PM, which doesn't handle significant digits on calibrations. And so I was at this company 1 week, 1 week, and I was in a room, got told I was the business owner of the system, and I got put in a room with IT leadership, and there was a person doing a demo of a system and walking through how to manage calibrations. And I just sat there for an hour and a half while they did a bunch of stuff. And at the end of it, I just said, show me how it handles significant digits. and it just doesn't. So the question isn't, can I save money by squeezing you into a different box? The question is, what risk does that create in that scenario? It's not always about, can I save $1, right? I can save money, but at what cost, at what risk? And if somebody puts in the wrong digits and adds a 0 and you pass a calibration it should have failed, you can kill somebody. So you can't just let that go. And it's not about the various systems, but it's just the premise that organizations are always looking to save money. And I get that. But sometimes if they didn't have somebody in the room that knew to ask that question, they would have moved forward and created a risk in total ignorance of what those systems do, because they were folks that don't deal with those things every day. None of those folks were in the room. They just luckily happened to have me hired and put in a room.
That's common.
There's risk there. And I've seen we help companies go down the path of selection, and we narrow them down. We go through this big, robust selection process. Everybody votes. They select one system, and then finance or IT gets involved, and they pick one that scored much, much lower. And you're going, how? If what we said was important got scored against, how are you then deciding to go with the other system that either creates a risk, can't do what you needed to do just because it was a couple of dollars cheaper? Like, that makes zero. So we're going to waste the money, all of the money, on system A because we're not willing to spend the delta for system B. It's not the total money that matters. It's the delta that matters. Let me explain that. If I'm going to spend $50,000 a year on CMMS A that cannot do what I need it to do, or spend $60,000 a year on system B and it can do what I need it to do, the question is not, I want to save 10 grand. The question is, why would you waste 50?
Good way. That tells the whole story.
You're not asking. I don't care about the 10. The 10 is a delta. You are making a conscious choice to waste 50 versus get value from 60. That's not the same thing. You only need to spend 10 to get value. You're already going to spend the 50. So the question becomes, do I piss away the 50 or do I spend 10 and get value? And they don't look at it right. They look at the total cost, and that's not how you should be looking at the delta between functional capability of what you need versus what is the cheapest option.
Well, now I'm going to change it up again, and I want to challenge the Wheel of Hogwash and introduce a new wrinkle to the topic, and that is, are there examples that you've experienced where leadership, in a sense, it's a strong word, loves the CMMS?
Wow. That's a tough question. I would say on the business side, yes. I've been in organizations where they see a significant value. I've been in organizations where they've done a phenomenal job at CMMS implementation. I've seen CMMS systems that I would think are not top tier echelon systems where all of the users love it. They don't know anything different, and they've learned how to make that system work, and they do a phenomenal job. And I've been in organizations where leadership is a proponent of the necessity of the CMMS, and they wholeheartedly believe that they get value from it. I will also say that they are the minority.
Mm.
Those organizations are not the majority. The majority of places that we end up visiting initially either were not trained well enough to understand what they have in front of them, and so they say it doesn't do what I need it to do. They didn't configure it appropriately for their business, 1,000 reasons, but it's not really the system. And then the system gets blamed for it. And so every 3 years they get a new system and they keep going through the same vicious cycle.
Yeah.
I would say that's probably more common, but there's a handful of places and organizations, and not always big companies. I've been in small companies that have done a phenomenal job at CMMS implementation, at utilization, and are seeing a really good value from the system. But I would say that overall, that's a minority, not a majority.
Yeah. And I think of lots of examples where there's thriving, there's huge upside, and it starts to become, we couldn't do what we do without this, but all that other work still has to be done. It's necessary. And when we say why leadership hates the CMMS, your CMMS, I think what we're really saying as a way to close out this topic is they just don't understand and appreciate the CMMS, and that's possible, but you're going to have to do the work. It's not going to be a single conversation. There's not a magic silver bullet. You got to put in the time. You got to talk to the people. You got to talk their language, and you have to understand them. Anything else, you just got lucky. Pretty much.
Look,
So,
do you have a clothes, like folks have a clothes dryer in their house? Completely unnecessary appliance.
yeah.
Tell them to go get rid of the clothes dryer and see how it goes at home.
Yeah. That's there's a clever name for what that strategy is called, but yeah, it works.
And see how that goes at home. Can you be on paper and be a very successful maintenance organization? I believe you can. Because people have done it in the past. Would I recommend it? No. But the mentality at some leadership levels is that it's an unnecessary just add-on cost, and that's not true either. I think for organizations that you do use it, if you told them to shut it off, like you had said, that it's part of how they do business now. I mean, that's we need it to function the way we function, and you don't know that going into a new CMMS. If you've not gone down the journey of implementation and utilization and using it successfully, your organization will change. You'll realize I need, another electrician that I didn't realize I needed because, we've got far more equipment to PM. We realize we need one less HVAC person. We need 2 more mechanics. Like, the data is going to morph what the organization looks like. We're going to need a planner now because we're starting to get more work coming in and we need to plan it appropriately and we want to be more efficient. It's going to change how the organization does business. Without it, you will not go through that. You will continue to do what you currently do. So it's not necessarily about the known value immediately today, because you can only think of what am I going to get out of how we do things today by making it electronic. You're not necessarily looking at, 10 years from now, the whole organization is going to look different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's another aspect of communicating to leadership that gets lost or is unknown, is that this will change how you do business if you use it effectively.
Yeah, that reminds me a lot of cultural differences when we look at the world and different regions of the world and how they approach these things, playing long game versus short game. And it's a real thing. I've been talking to a lot of people about it lately, so that reminded me of that. Do you want to go back to the Wheel of Hogwash one more time for today?
How much time do we go through?
We're
I'm
at about
wide open,
35 minutes.
brother. You want to do this one more time? Let's see. I think we can do that one more time.
Let's try it.
So we're going to remove why leadership hates CMMS, and then we're going to run her again.
The Wheel of Hogwash spins in perpetuity.
Oh man, what IT doesn't tell you.
Everybody, we did not influence this at all. This is excellent. Excellent. We got all the salt today, baby. Let's talk about it. So, what IT does not tell you about the CMMS? What are some examples of that? And then we'll get into, maybe we'll try to figure out why.
I think the biggest example for me is user statuses. So inside, I'm not going to say every CMMS because I'm sure there's so many of them. There's got to be an example where this is not true. But inside the CMMS, the work order status, we'll say, inside the system, there are specific status names that are there for a reason because they drive functional capability. They drive security rights of what you can and cannot do to a record based on its current status. For example, if a work order, we'll say, is in a status of new, meaning somebody just created it, you can't usually put time on it yet. You can't add transactions because it hasn't been approved to go out into the field yet. It can be canceled still. It might not ever get done. There's certain things you can and can't do. And from that initial status, you can decide what statuses a work order can or cannot change status into. So from new, can it go right to closed? From new, can it go to complete? From new, does it, if it can't do those things, does it go to, and released or approved or, what in progress, whatever. Each one of those system statuses, you can define what does and does not happen and which way and directions you can move. Can I go backwards in status? All those things are configurable in the system. The second piece is that for any one of those system statuses, I can have synonym statuses, meaning I can have one that means the same thing, but I name it something else. So, for example, let's say a work order gets approved. That means it's ready to go. I can send it out to get done, but it's not yet in progress. Inside of there, I can have waiting to be planned, planning, planned but not scheduled, or scheduled, or, I can have 10 statuses that belong to my workflow. And they all essentially mean that I'm approved to go get done, but I'm not out in the field getting done yet. Oftentimes, we try to enforce our business process around whatever the out-of-the-box statuses are because IT has never explained to us that we can have as many statuses as we want as long as we know what their system equivalent is. And oftentimes, I run into so many organizations that they have no idea that's even an option.
This right here is a major blind spot. I don't even know how many times I've seen it. And then adding to that, I was thinking, well, the IT department doesn't tell you that they set up the CMMS for you and that they don't know much about maintenance.
They don't know any of it.
And
Exactly.
and in fairness, Sometimes they don't know any better. They were told to do something. They did it the best that they could. They got it in your hands. And now it's 6, 12, 18 months later. And somebody like George comes in or whoever, and they go, did you notice that inside you can add this and this to our approval stages and match the workflow we've always been using? And now you're like 18 months gone. And and we want to blame IT. So I want to leave a little bit of wiggle room for IT to be the helpful people that they are, because
Well, I would
as
say
much as
some of the issue is they're ignorant to it, right? Like, when's the last time you saw a CMMS implementation company give specific training to IT?
I can I can give personal examples in my past life where we did that and we saw what I thought, looking back now, I knew it at the time, but not like I know it now. It was incredible when IT was bought in and like, oh, okay, we want to see this process because we
Right.
were always trying to make it so they didn't have to do anything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But what you're talking about is they have blind spots they don't know about, and
That's right.
they're certainly taxed and overworked in a lot of ways where they're focused on their priorities and not maintenance priorities.
Yes.
They're bothered by it. That's another thing they might not tell you, that we're bothered when you need our help with the CMMS or to deploy the CMMS, or we have to do uh, uh, SOC 2 Type 2, make sure the compliance is there and all that verification. Like, we don't have time for this stuff because they just don't care.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think there's a lot of that, right? There are so many back end settings. We'll say back end. It's really not the back end. It's just on the administrative side.
Right.
Um, in terms of how you structure security rights, and I see that get messed up all the time. And how you decide things like LIFO versus FIFO when parts come in and out of a storeroom. They're all settings in many CMMS systems, not all of them, that you can configure on the administrative side, on the system administrative side. I don't mean the business user administrator. The system administrator can often make configuration changes. And one of the things the business should ask for is to sit down and see all of those menu options, go through all of the administrative menu options, and make selections on how the system should operate. But no one even tells you that exists, because as a user, you log in and guess what you don't see? Administration. So
Yeah.
you don't see the menu option. You don't know it exists, right? And there's probably other screens you don't even know exist. There's stuff that out of the box, when it gets installed, may not necessarily be obvious or visible to every user. And IT might say, well, it was turned off out of the box, so we're not even going to turn on that functionality, right? And the functionality's sitting in the system, and they can just turn it on, but no one even knows there's an option to say yes.
That's That's right. It's in setup. And when you go to company settings, if you go to the fourth tab, you'll see that you have a series of drop downs to configure the actual permission levels for what we would call a site administrator, or maybe it's for a technician, which means someone that can do these sets of things with no visibility to those sets of things. They just don't have the time or the awareness, and they just want to get it done. So it's a weird thing, right? Because I think people might think, oh, these guys just want to crush IT. That's not always the case.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Look, the title of the segment is what IT doesn't tell you. It's not necessarily because they just want to hide things from you.
Correct.
They might no, they should tell you, right? Like, you've got to ask questions if you want to get answers.
I've got one. I've got one. I want to see if this holds water for the topic. When we have IT and they are the owner of the CMMS, they own its existence, where it lives, and then yeah, it's true. And they really are, and they take that ownership, and then somewhere along the lines, someone that was actually in IT and actually trying to manage that ownership, and they cared about it and they checked on it and they double checked things, they've left. They've left the organization. They won the lottery, I hope. Right? Now we've got a new one. doesn't look at it for 12 months. Happens a lot, right?
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if that's something that they don't tell you, but people on the plant floor, people in leadership, in the C suite, and everybody in between, things might look and appear all right, but they don't understand that they've got a blind spot that's growing and it's eventually going to cause a problem. That's another thing that they couldn't tell you because they don't know. Because now you got a new, let's say it's an IT director. Day one, you don't know everything. It's just not a thing. It's
Yeah,
not a
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And we sometimes expect and want that. But have you seen that happen that exact way too? So they aren't telling you because that's another huge blind spot, and they could care. I keep going back to they could care less. That's not the right way to put it. I think it's more about they're too busy and they didn't know that was a thing. We can
Yeah.
help them, right? How do we do that?
Well, I think the business should own as much of the application as they possibly can. They should not own certain aspects, like like let's say, in today's world with a lot of SaaS solutions, there's not a whole lot for IT to do on the CMMS side. So when IT is involved heavily, it's usually because it's some older system where you have on-premise implementations. However, even in the SaaS systems, there is going to still be an administrative side of the house where you're configuring certain things like what currency are we going to use or what currencies do we allow and all kinds of other configuration entities. I think if they are single entity administrative options that you decide on one time, IT is fine to own that, but they should go through with the business to decide what they're going to be. If they are entities that might change over time into some level, like what user statuses are going to exist, I don't see a reason for if you have a business side application owner, one, um, then I think you can allow the business side to own stuff like that. But you got to train them, right? I mean, people can really mangle a system if they go in there and start touching stuff they're not supposed to be touching.
Oh,
I'm a big
yeah.
proponent of if you have a process and you have a position dedicated to that on the business side, give it to the business. It'll truncate the time window of getting stuff done, not because IT is lazy, but because they've got 800 other systems to support. And they may only have one person that knows how to go into that system to do what you're asking for. And so it's not necessarily a function of how big is the IT organization. Sometimes they only have one person that can actually access it on their side and make those changes. So I think, IT has to sit down with you to go over all those various configuration items because there are a lot of them in some systems that's really, really big.
I was at a conference this year, speaking of what you talked about with IT and having 800 systems to manage. And there might be some people might recoil at that going, that's hogwash. There was an onstage presentation, and I'm not going to say the name of the company, but they literally had at least 1,000 different software systems in their organization.
Yeah.
And so for anybody that believes that that's unlikely, it's actually pretty common for lots and lots of tech stacks that these IT departments have to manage. And if you think about, they should be in real-time communication about every little thing. It's like I love that idea as an ideal for which to strive, but things just don't work that way. There's a thing called capacity. So getting back to giving them some room to breathe, that we're not just, slapping them around some. They've got blind spots that they don't know about.
Yeah.
And this is one that I think case by case, if in the future, as we continue with this series, we can start to come up with prime examples of it's this kind of entity. This is exactly what they make. This is how many people they have. These are the roles that they have. These are the types of operators. These are the materials and da, 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 da. We could start to give more insights, if you will, or guidance, if you want to call it, on hey, when it comes to IT, make sure they know this, this, and this, and ask them about this, this, that, and the other thing, because you're going to need that. And by asking, they now have an awareness, because the first thing they're going to say is, why are you asking? That's an opportunity for the business
Yeah.
to improve its awareness of things that people don't play with on a daily basis, if that's fair. I mean, I think this is one of those segments. Are there any other big ones when it comes to what IT does not tell you about the CMMS that jump out to you?
I think I mean, there's certainly a few. I think one of the ones that is important is IT has to teach the business how to enter a ticket.
Mm,
We typically call up IT or email IT and we say, hey, CMMS ABC has a bug in it. And we describe the bug and that's it. If we understand how IT manages tickets, whether it's in a system like ServiceNow or some other entity, they want to know what the configuration item name is. They want to know what application within the CMMS is affected. They want to know, is it field related or a transaction related, or is it like they want, because that diverts the ticket to the right person. If all they have is a description, you're wasting time while they figure out what that issue is. So if they teach you how to enter a ticket, your ticket can get done faster.
yeah, and to clarify, when George says a ticket, he's saying when you need to enlist IT's support and guidance on something you're doing with the CMMS, whatever that ticketing system is, not to make that equal to your work orders or those kinds of what sometimes people sometimes call it a ticket, which I think ticket is very, very, very specific for IT, but a lot of people
Yeah.
borrow and switch out terms. And that's something that really makes sense when I think about it, because IT speaks a very specific language,
Yes,
and
they do.
in some of that, it's extremely rapid, and that's why they'll tell you, "Oh, you just had a 10, an ID 10T error," and it's because there's that. And then when you get into the other part of it where they don't know what you're really talking about, they need that clarification because they're looking at entire systems within systems on top of systems, and they have their own logic tree for how that's all connected and what that
That's
really
exactly
means and who it should go to. Level 1, level 2, level 3, over here, over there. So,
and sometimes that's offshored, right, or third partied.
oh
And
god.
so it's even more critical for you to understand that process a little bit and get some training in it. I'd say the other piece that IT kind of maybe not holds to themselves, but doesn't necessarily tell us is how to get the data out. The fact that the company probably owns a data historian and you can dump whatever you want in it and be able to get the data out, even through just basic like Excel connections. I think IT doesn't publicly offer that as an option, and they'll say, well, these are the reports that come with the system, and that's just the way the system works. And
Mm.
if you know how to ask some questions like, well, do we have a data historian? Can I put in a ticket to have data dumped in the historian so I can draw it out another way? If no one knows to ask those questions, then IT has a way to slam a door on you and say, well, put in a ticket for a new report. Well, I don't need a new report. I'm curious about one thing. I need to run the data so I can go investigate it. And I don't need a whole report written, and I don't need to wait 6 months for it. If I had a connection, I could just draw the data out and do my analysis. And IT doesn't necessarily openly tell you there's other ways to get information out of a system.
I want to add something to that, that for years and years I've always encouraged this, and I encourage it right here right now. Anybody that hears this, there might be one or two people. I think I think it's important that whether you have to work this through IT or not, any system you have, you should have either the option to pull your data down on a regular frequency so that you have it. Things happen. This is not on anybody, but it is on you. If you can get your data so you can work with it in other ways, in other systems. And that is something that IT can help you with and get involved in, because whoever provides your CMMS, sorry, CMMS companies, but I'm keeping it real. You shouldn't be holding data hostage. They will want to know that they can get their data because they've made a heavy investment in something that mostly already belongs to them. It's their process, it's their people, it's their things. So I want to close out on that, a little bit soapboxy, but I really think it's important that you always have access to and can store a copy of your data on some cadence that puts you, worst case, a month behind, but that could be really terrible. I mean, I love
And
keeping the data somewhere where you have the integrity to change systems if you needed to. Not saying that you're going to leave. I know every CMMS company wants sticky clients, but not hostages, man. We ain't down for that.
yeah, and even if it's a SaaS solution, you can recommend a regular backup interval.
Typically, I've still to this day found a few that don't and will not do it, or they don't know how, which for me, that's just, you did it earlier. I mean,
Yeah,
give me a break. Give me a break. I got some stories about that I can't put on the podcast when it comes to data and the things I've heard, because I would talk company, and I don't want to do that. It's
yeah,
not right.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it's out there, folks. Beware. And if you ever are lost, there's a guy right here. You can see him on screen. He's wearing a Reliability X shirt. He can help. He's willing to spare time just to help you and give you some advice. And he might even tell you to call me at 2 a.m. so that I can tell you some advice. George Williams, thank you for this first series that we're building out all around the Wheel of Hogwash.
This has been a lot of fun, Greg. Thanks.
Always is, man. Thank you, brother.
All right, brother.
Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit cmmsradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.